welcome back to Getting to the Top, where I interview transformational leaders about their leadership journey in hopes of inspiring you on your leadership journey and that we learn something together about what we're all doing here and why the life that we lead should be important. So today I have the honor of interviewing Raya Salter. She's an attorney, an activist, and author with a focus on energy and climate justice. She's the founder of the Energy Justice Law and Policy Center and a member of the New York State Climate Action Council. She serves on many boards and is also a professor at Cardozo Law School, the author of Energy Justice, and a host with Facing Future TV, where she develops climate programs, including from COP26 and COP27. And that's where I had the great honor of meeting her. And she happens to have the auspicious honor of being the only person I know who testified before Congress and went viral as a result. So we will talk about that. But welcome, Raya. Please take this opportunity to introduce yourself.
Thank you so very much, Racquel. It was a wonderful honor to meet you at COP27. So yes, I'm an attorney, I'm an activist, I'm a mom, a single mom of a college-age student. And yes, I focus my work on energy justice. My training is in energy regulation. I practiced before becoming an activist. I spent almost 5 years in the private sector as a regulatory associate for the Wall Street law firm of Dewey and LaBeouf. And from there, went to do nonprofits and now really do focus on justice and, demonstrating and being in the streets. So I just mentioned that because it's a life journey and I am delighted to be here.
I'm really, really glad to have this chance to chat because, I wondered when I saw all of the things that you've done and all of the things that you continue to do that truly inspires me. Like how did you unlock that potential? Where did it start? When did you first realize that you were going to be this formidable leader?
Thank you so much for that question. And I want to answer so often, it always comes from that center of who I am as a woman and as a person and what my values are. And I want folks to understand that I think that a lot of us, especially Black women, especially women of color, who come up with this understanding of, what some of these justice struggles are from a personal perspective, we have this, fire in the belly, this passion and this desire to make a difference, but also to do it in a way that, helps each other, helps other women. We're concerned about children, concerned about families, concerned about, human rights. And so I really just want folks to feel and understand and identify with that feeling that so many of us have. That's what really, and we need to keep listening to it. That's what guides you. That's what's going to move you forward. And it is challenging, to lead with those values. And there's a time and a season sometimes, there's a time for being in school, a time for working for, the government, a time for working outside of government on this journey. So that really is where I'll start with that from. That's something I think so many of us can identify with.
Definitely. So when was it that you sort of chose law as the thing that you would pursue?
I'm actually a second career lawyer.
Really?
Indeed. I did. And this is another thing I like to share and be open about because I didn't go to law school until I was 33. Wow. And I had just broken up. I was married, but I had just broken up. My marriage had just broken up and I had a 3-year-old child. And I was a single mom. And that's when I decided that it was time for me to go to law school. Because I think I had done different things. I had worked in middle school programs. I'd worked in media. And I looked around at myself and I said, you know what? Who am I supposed to be? Who do I want to be? I want to be an advocate. I want to further express that feeling, that fire inside about caring for others, about justice. And I doubled down on it and it was hard. It wasn't easy, but sometimes things aren't easy. I'm sure we all have our stories. So I like to say that to other women who may have children, maybe at different points of their lives.
Oh, I love that. So when you were, let's say when you were five and people asked you, what did you want to be when you grew up? Was it that you wanted to be an attorney then, but then ended up taking a different path? Or at that point you just had something else entirely in mind?
As a thank you so much for that question. It's it's lovely to get these questions and to think about your child self. I think I was one of those children, and we all know this child, the one who speaks up a lot, who expresses their ideas. Adults may say, that one's going to be a lawyer. I was ambitious and I felt that I was important. And I think that my parents, in the 70s did a good job of inspiring that confidence and keeping up that confidence. But I think if you had asked me, I might have said I wanted to be president or something.
Nice.
I don't think I would have known, lawyer or various professions would be, but I knew I wanted to be somebody important.
Well, the president thing isn't that's like not a done deal, just so you know.
I love that you say that, because since I turned 50 this year, I've been talking with friends about how, life, we're on the upper floor and life is sort of unfolding now. And I think of people like Nancy Pelosi, I guess she's still the House Majority Leader, and how I think she has 5 children and didn't enter politics until her 40s. So, and I have skills to build. Shall I be Madam President? And yes, we should be looking at learning and growing in that way.
Yeah, I love it. And so it turns out we were born the same year.
Oh, hey, it was a good year, 1970.
Good year. Fabulous, fabulous. So, you knew that you were going to be something. So what was the thing that when you left school, what did you do? What did you do leaving school?
You mean undergraduate or?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, tell us about undergraduate, then graduate.
Girl, it's funny because I just knew I was so interested in pop culture and music and entertainment. And I had grown up in Pittsburgh and I went to school in Connecticut. And I said, I'm going to go to New York City. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. And I'm going to work in media and entertainment when I was 20, 21. And that's what I did.
Okay. All right. Fabulous. And so, was it that, so what was that turning point for you? You're in media and entertainment. That's I think it's super glamorous on the outside. Sometimes, from what I hear, not as glamorous on the inside. Describe the experience of being in your 20s, being in New York, being in the media and entertainment industry. What was that like?
Great question. The 90s was it turns out for us Gen X, now we're cool again, right? Everything 90s is cool. It was a really interesting time for music and entertainment, and in some ways perhaps a simpler time than now. And it was a great time to be running around, getting to meet. I did get to meet. I ultimately worked at MTV News.
Nice.
As the talent coordinator of all things. I don't talk about this very much, actually, because it's sort of, from 1996 or something. And I don't know if you remember people like Tabitha Soren.
Of course.
Serena Altschul, John Norris, Chris Connolly, Abby Kearse. So I worked with the folks at MTV, and I did get to see a lot of stars, and it was very exciting and felt very glamorous, at the time. And I enjoyed that, and it was fun. And, it was also kind of gig economy, didn't make a lot of money, very competitive, very challenging. I think that's probably still the case. But I think that the takeaway, it's interesting because I still do media because of that love of wanting to communicate. But I don't regret any of it, because again, it was that following that passion, about, how can I make a difference? How can I be the person that I want to be?
Yeah. And so here you are, married and then separated, and you decide, you know what? I'm going to be an attorney. With this 2-year-old, I'm going to go to law school, because that's not the most challenging thing I can do. Law school by itself is not hard enough. With a 2-year-old as a single mom. So tell us about, do you remember the moment in which you made that decision, and what was going through your head? Was it just like, what was going through your head?
You know what? I will actually thank you for asking. And I think it was, I was working for, and I love working with youth and doing youth development. And I had taken a job that was kind of a temporary job, and it was wintertime. It was like January, not where you are, but where I am in New York, it gets cold, like really in a parking lot, and it'll look like a freezing tundra. And somehow I had gotten to this point in this job where I was supposed to be doing like administration and stuff with the kids, and that was great. But I had gotten in a place where I had volunteered or something, and I was actually driving the after school bus, and I had actually been dropping all the kids off at their house. And then I pulled in back to it with the bus, boop, 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 under the garage. And it was so cold. And I looked around and I was like, not that I have any driving a school bus, that is an honorable profession. I'm not trying to say anything about that. But I said, well, how did I end up? Well, how is it that I'm here now in this freezing cold parking lot, having been the actual driver for the bus driver for the after school program? And I was like, you know what? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is what I want to be doing and who I want to be. And I think I want to take a new direction. Again, no disrespect to anybody who drives a bus. And I drove a bus, right? I was driving a bus. And I said, but that doesn't mean I always have to drive a bus.
Right.
It was literally the moment when I was like, you know what? I'm dusting off those applications. I'm putting those applications in. I don't know if I can afford it. I don't know if I'll get financial aid. I don't know how I'll do it. But if I don't put the application in, I'll never know.
Wow. That, I remember as a child, there was this thing where this woman jumped in front of a car or jumped over a fence to save her child from something. And it was like all over the news, and we were talking about it. And it was just sort of like she found strength she didn't know she had in order to save her child. And my best friend and I at the time asked her mother, have you ever done anything like that? Have you ever, jumped over a fence to save a child or anything like that? Like somehow got superhuman strength. And she said, when my husband died and I had the four of you, that was me digging deep into my superhuman strength and just because she was a housewife and having to find a career to take care of these four kids. And we looked at her like, well, that's not it. just
as kids, yeah.
Yeah, like you've totally missed the point of the question.
You're like, whoa, no, we thought, we want to see jumping. We want to see.
Yeah, we want to see, you scale to the top of a tree to save a child. Oh my God, recovering from the death of your husband with 4 small children. And the funny thing is, it isn't until you get to that point in your life where you're looking after somebody else that you realize what a superhuman feat it is to embark upon a journey where you're entering into the unknown, especially with a 2-year-old, when you don't know how it's going to work out. You don't know how you're going to afford it. You don't know what's on the other side of that door, but there is potentially a better future for you on the other side of that door, and you're just willing to open it. And you don't know what you're going to have to go through.
Can I say that I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was the other part of why I went to law school. And I love that question, because they're like, you didn't jump up on a tree to save them kids. And what they don't get is that them kids ate that night and they ate the next day and they went to school and they were held safe. They don't understand how it is. Yeah. And actually it was speaking to a very good friend, someone who's still a dear, dear friend she is an attorney. She was an attorney at the time and I was not. Mm-hmm. And I asked her I was like, wow, to your point, I said, wow, how am I going to be a single mom? Like, does this mean that that this idea I've had of a middle-class life for my child is just not going to happen? Like, how can I do this by myself? Yeah. And that was what she said back. She was like, you go, you can. You go ahead, go back to law school. You can. You can make this happen. You can. And I think about that moment all the time, because that was the twin moment to be in under the garage in the school bus, is when another woman, a good dear friend who was already a lawyer, was like, you can do this. And she was right.
Fabulous. So you're entering law school. So what was your support system like? You get into law school. Tell me about that process.
No, I think that's also important, because you can't sort of, sometimes to make something pencil out, you have to make sacrifices or lifestyle decisions. And one of the ones that I made was to live with my mother and father. And I was very fortunate that my mother and father were there for me, And so really during that period when I live in New Rochelle, which is just north of New York City, and I went to Fordham Law School, which is, kind of in midtownish in Manhattan. And, when I went to class and I was in class at 4:00, my mother or father would pick my daughter up from the after school program. They had to drive, not the bus, but the car. And they did a lot of that. They were there for me. And I kind of chose a different life path because of that, that's just sort of, and now I live with my parents to this day because now we're at a different stage where, they need more help. So definitely a lifestyle, choice.
Yeah. And you have to take tough decisions, about your life and about the kind of life that you want. So would you say when your friend said to you, you can do it, that was the best advice you had gotten, or what was the best advice that you've received?
It's funny. I don't think I really at that time, I don't know if I got this advice, but I think I did to a certain extent. But it's certainly one. I'm interested in your thoughts when younger people or people who are thinking about becoming lawyers decide or ask me whether or not they should, or how should they go about that. And one is that it's great to become a lawyer, but only if you actually want to do what lawyers do. Yeah. Which looks like it's, being dramatic like Johnny Cochran on, on television, or being on CSI, doing all these maybe glamorous looking things in court. But it really means you have to be happy to do some reading the things nobody wants to read.
The things that everybody else gets to ignore, that the lawyers have to actually make sure doesn't say gobbledygook, gobbledygook.
Exactly. All of a lot of research, writing, long hours in sort of, I don't know what else to call it, but intellectual pursuit, often being a counselor, which is not the same as being, that maybe you could be a business leader, but a lawyer is often a counselor. And I think the days of going to law school because it's a good degree to get and you can learn some good things and it'll be transferable are kind of over now because of how expensive law school is and how the job market can be very challenging. So that idea of wanting to really wanting to do what lawyers do, because there are a lot of unhappy lawyers. And also someone flagged a very unfortunate aspect of the legal profession, which is just the elitism in terms of, what you can expect, that you may have different opportunities or barriers depending on what school you're able to go to. Yeah. And look, not everyone can go to Harvard Law School. Yeah. I certainly didn't. I went to Fordham. I didn't go to an Ivy League school at all. So anyway.
So you graduate from law school, and what kind of law did you plan to practice?
It's interesting because in a slightly different world, I would have been a prosecutor. One of the things I did as when I was in law school is I had an internship at the Manhattan District Attorney's office.
Oh, wow.
And I'd actually, because of the work I'd done with women and children, I requested to be in the sex crimes unit because I wanted to see what it would be like to, put the bad guys in the jail.
Yeah.
And it's complicated, right? Because all of us, the criminal justice system, as we know, is can be very unjust, in particular to, Black people, people of African descent throughout the world, but in the United States. But I will say that sort of, you get a badge, like having that badge and being that authority and walking in, to ask someone who was, accused of a terrible sex crime, with the force of the law behind you. It like spoke to a piece of my, I don't know, self-righteousness or my sense of power in a way that was very compelling. And also I had gotten an internship a summer associateship at a law firm of Dewey and LaBeouf. And be totally frank, when you are coming out of law school, you're thinking about, you've got this degree and you don't really know anything, and you've got to find some training, and set a direction. And I said, I'm so compelled by this, but I don't think that this criminal justice system with its sort of two sides is something that I want to go for. And also I think that there definitely was a piece of me that wanted the training and the financial opportunity that came with the Wall Street law firm at that, having gone through, taken out all those loans, having,
And so you're a pretty mature intern at this point. What was that like?
That is all, and that's the thing. You know what? It's interesting because, and I hope anyone listening, because at the time I did feel quite older than, a lot of the other people. But the truth was I was 33, 34. Like looking back, I was very young. So I think that's something it's funny. I think when one is younger, one is more obsessed with this idea of getting old.
Yeah.
I'm turning 20. I'm turning 30.
Yeah.
I'm turning 40.
And now, I'm like, I don't know about you, but for me, like 50 was like extreme excitement. I have never been so excited about becoming an age. Never, ever. So definitely, I think the age thing starts to fade away as you get older.
Doesn't it feel good to be a full-grown woman, Auntie?
It does. It does. I am loving this. I'm loving this side. I really am. I'm absolutely adoring it. So you're interning, and then you get this amazing job with this wonderful Wall Street law firm. How then do you decide that you want to get into climate and activism? Is it something that strikes you straight away, or is it something that, it's a slow burn? How does that happen?
It's interesting. I think I always knew that I was interested just from, I studied human rights, is when I had electives in law school. I was, I think this is something that I suspect you'll identify with what I'm saying, but infrastructure, oil and gas in particular, kind of spoke to me in that context in terms of, inequality. How is it that, nations that produce so much of these valuable commodities, are yet so, so poor. And I found all of that fascinating. And also at this time is when everyone was talking about this clean energy revolution. And also I'll mention for folks out there who might be interested in climate and the environment, if you are interested in economics and technology in particular, then energy can be just a very gratifying and sort of intellectually satisfying area, because so much of it is about markets, economics, managed markets, commodities. And so for me, I studied economics as an undergrad. Those things converged and kind of set me on the path to say, I want to work in the energy practice of this firm. I always knew that I wanted to be an advocate, but I also knew, well, that I as a lawyer, I was one. but you really do need to get training as an attorney, one way or the other, though, one way or the other. People do not have to go and work for a Wall Street law firm. And part of me wishes I felt like I did for the money and because of the prestige. And that's what I did. And I guess I did get some money and maybe some prestige from that, but it's not the only path, but you do need to get some training. And so ultimately I did have the seasons of my life turned, and I actually 2008 financial crisis happened. The whole economy and industry was shaken up, but I was able to transfer into a new season of becoming an environmental advocate advocating for clean and renewable energy. Okay.
And then, what is the diversity like in that system? Were you it?
Pretty much it. Actually, there was someone who was a mentor, also who was who was from Trinidad and Tobago, who was a brilliant young partner, Andrienne Payson. She did ultimately become a partner. She was there. She was in the oil and gas practice. I think she was the only one. And certainly almost every instance, in almost every room, in almost every deal, in almost every advocacy space since then, I have almost always been one of few women and probably the only woman of color in those rooms. It's starting to change a little bit. And I say that because I would almost say it like, is anybody out? I am alone. Oh, do you exist?
But it's an opportunity, isn't it? It's an opportunity because that space is so lacking diversity that those of us who don't look like or aren't what is almost only there, and those of us who aspire to those spaces should be eyeing those spaces as, hey, you should be looking for candidates like me.
I sigh because it's always a challenge. This is something you've probably you may have heard before, is that someone will look at you and say, well, I'm sure it's been easy for you. Everyone is looking for is looking for a woman of color, a Black woman, or this and that, and isn't it easy for you? And there is a real dissonance, that we have to deal with in terms of showing up on the scene and being the only one and facing a lot of barriers. And yet you're like, but shouldn't there be a red carpet?
Yeah, that's
according to the things I heard, there would be a red carpet out here for me, and there is not.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, because I think that's true, that you expect that, and everyone's always talking about diversity and inclusion, but then you face these enormous barriers. And even when you're in the spaces, I was talking to a woman recently, and she was saying, oh, it was our cop, a lovely, lovely lady that I met randomly on the bus. And she said, she was in financial services, working for a big hedge fund, I think it is. And she says, what you would expect is that we are increasing in diversity in this space. She said, but it's decreasing, because once you're in this space, there are so many barriers that you face that women are leaving in droves. And she said, and it worries me deeply because I feel like things are tilting in the wrong direction. And I certainly think that it's important for us to recognize that while we seek to diversify many of these spaces, it is not an easy journey by any means. But these are things that some of us have to take seriously and take the hit on, because that is how we clear the path for the others who come behind us.
I have to say that I think you're exactly right, because one way to look at it is that, this call for diversity is only there because of, like you're saying, folks who've taken the hit, women like ourselves who have voiced, our concerns and created a measure of accountability. You know, and every time you do so, you pay a little bit. You know, you walk into, it's been all of the women before us who walked into a room and said, I'm the only woman here. Do you understand that? That's a problem.
Yeah.
I'm the only person of color here. Do you see that? That's a problem.
Yeah.
And so basically saying that if there wasn't a problem, then nobody would be saying all these things they say. And we still seem to be at that place in many industries where what the DEI really means is we need someone we can point to. I hate to say the word token, but it's still, you know, we've got to have at least someone we can point to that we're doing this. And it still feels like we can be at that level. And so I say that so that folks can understand that the red carpet is not rolled out. Or in some instances, there, you know, organizations could really be trying, but I would really hope, especially younger women, to be open and clear-eyed about it.
But absolutely decisive about where you want to get to, and understand that there are allies in the space, and to look out for both people who look like you and people who don't look like you, because the strides that you and I have been able to make, we haven't been able to make only because people like us helped us. Because there were people,
very huge part.
Yeah, because a lot of the rooms that we have been in and been the only woman and the only woman of color, it's because somebody else had a light bulb moment and said, wait a minute, let me drag you in here. Or wait a minute, she's at the door, let's open. So I think it's looking at finding the opportunities in all spaces, but we being willing to struggle.
You said something so important, and we have the saying that, I hate to say this, to all your skin folk ain't your kin folk. Like, sometimes that one person you do see will not be an ally or a friend, and that's also something to be looking out for. I think when I was younger, sometimes I was so eager to find those allies and role models who look like me, and could be a little naive, frankly, about you know, what position maybe they were in and what their inclination or intention may have been. But this part exactly, when I was at the law firm and you know, the financial crisis hit and the firm was in such trouble, it was a very senior, you know, white male partner who kind of looked at me and was like, we need to get her some billable hours. For folks who are not in the profession, if you don't bill, you don't have a job.
Yeah.
Like, she's working very hard. And he was like, you know what, we're doing, I know this is not a big client, but one of the consulting attorneys was, his name is Ashley Brown. And at the time, he's now retired, but he was forgive me, I'm trying to remember his title now, but I think he was like the director of the Kennedy School at Harvard's Energy Policy Center. So, you know, a very prestigious energy policy center, and he needed to write some reports. Some clients wanted to hire him to write some reports. And the partner was like, Ashley, why don't you work with Raya on your reports? Because, you know, you don't want to do all the research for them, to be honest. Why don't you work with Raya? And that turned into me getting to co-author several pieces with some, you know, with a very, you know, prestigious and brilliant, you know, mind in the space. And I co-authored several pieces about smart grid, about electricity. I have some of these publications still here. And they really became a feather in my cap. And when I was looking to transition into the NGO field, I was able to say, you know, I have written this, you know, report on smart grid regulation and how, you know, to integrate clean energy into the 50 states. Like,
so is that how you got recognized? Is that how you got recognized to serve on all of the boards? So I think it's so important. I think there's so many phenomenal women out there and men, you know, who are just not being recognized or sought after for board seats. And I think it would add so much to the ability to have governance, to have diversity, to have different lived experiences in these spaces. And so I think I would hope that we can help different kinds of people getting elected to boards.
I couldn't agree more. I think most of all of the boards and advisories that I'm on are really NGOs, which is fine. But it's sort of like a different board role, but also a good space, to be on a board. And it was also another very esteemed older white male colleague who named Dick Ottinger, who for a long time was a congressman for this area in Westchester and has several buildings at Pace University Law School named after him, and helped found this organization called the Energy and Environmental Study Institute. And I had been working with him on some international sort of law matters for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN. Anyway, he's the one who was like, Raya, I think you'd be great on the board of EESI. And in my head, I said, okay, but I've also said, at this point, I'm not joining boards where I'm the only brown person. If you don't have a brown person on there already, I can't.
And I do the same thing with a lot of like panels that I'm on. I think when people are like, oh, let's get the woman. And I always say, I will not be the only woman, but I don't mind being the first woman, but you'd have to commit to me that you're going to find at least another woman. And for me now, especially, I'm a little more sought after now than at the time that I made that policy. But now I feel as though if you aren't making an effort to get to 50-50, if you're not showing me like I've invited this many women and this many men, then certainly it's not something that's worth my time. And I don't mind being the first, but I cannot be the only.
I think at this point that I think that's smart. That's advice I'd give to other women looking to serve on boards. I'm not saying that if you get an opportunity and you really feel like it's a great opportunity, you shouldn't take it. But there's definitely, we talked about that dissonance of entering a space when you're the only one, and the barriers, and how you sometimes do have to actually just take hits, be it to your own comfortability, smile when you really want to punch someone. And all of that takes its toll. So it's like you have to choose for yourself how much of it, when, where, and when you're willing to get involved in.
For sure. All right. So I wanna hear about how you ended up getting in trouble not going viral at Congress, having to testify before Congress, and how did you end up going viral?
Well, thank you for asking this question. And it was really interesting because it really did go viral. I mean, it went viral all over the world, and it was really fascinating to be the subject of that. As an energy attorney, activist, and expert, this was the second time that I've testified before Congress. And this is the House Oversight Committee. And they were having a hearing on big oil and gas, fossil fuel lies and misinformation. I think some of us don't know that the big oil companies have known for over 50 years that the oil and gas they were going to burn or were burning was going to cause the climate crisis. And it's something that they kept quiet and actively sort of work to keep quiet and to sort of change the narrative to minimize that for a long time. And that's an important thing to think about when you're thinking about the climate change. So I was asked to come and talk about that in the context of environmental justice. And some folks may know, have you heard of Cancer Alley?
I'm not certain. It sounds like something that I
the opportunity to mention it. So it's actually not an alley, but it's sort of known as like a poster child of environmental injustice in the United States. It is in Louisiana. There's a 80+ mile stretch of Louisiana that is so polluted from petrochemical refining, oil and gas refining and petrochemical production that they call it Cancer Alley. You've got
Oh, wow.
an intergenerational poisoning, mothers, fathers, uncles, aunties, children dying disproportionately of cancer because of all this pollution. And it's one of the more prominent examples of environmental injustice in the United States. And a lot of people are fighting, against this really terrible injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm, giving my testimony. And, of course, when you go before Congress, you put on your, you've got your suit and you're as august as you can be, and you've got your notes and you are your expert self. And it was the congressman from Louisiana, who is a ride or die for the oil or gas industry, saw a Black woman with all types of frizzy hair and figured this was going to be his chance to, score some points and get some fame. And the reason that I had to take him on the way I did, so he basically just started questioning me in sort of a silly, disrespectful manner, asking me questions, saying, I'm an environmentalist because I care about my planet. Do you care about the planet, young lady? Like, he called me young lady. He called me boo. Boo. This white man from Louisiana called me boo. and it was a complete shocker. Because he was the congressman from Louisiana, and I was there to talk about environmental injustice, I was particularly incensed that he would make light of this when it's his constituents that are being poisoned.
Right. Yeah,
like,
and are dying.
Dare he?
Yeah.
And so he was playing this clown, and so I had to say to him, if you care about God, you care about your God and your planet, then you need to search your heart and think about repenting, because your actions are killing the Black and poor people of your own state. And the fossil fuel industry that owns your state is killing the natural world. And I had to tell him about himself. Now, it just so happened that AOC, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, was in the meeting that day. And because of, her stature, she actually spoke up and said, that was a shame how you disrespected this witness. She apologized to me. She called him out. And so between AOC, and this clown from Louisiana, that is how it sort of whoosh ended up going viral, to the extent that Tucker Carlson, I don't know if Tucker Carlson is.
Oh, no, I know who Tucker Carlson is. And I think, people who watch Fox News or people who loathe Fox News would know who Tucker Carlson is. Yeah.
So the end of that story is that I have the honor of he actually invited that representative onto his show, and they did a whole segment that was a takedown on me.
Oh, wow.
They edited the video to make it, he'd asked me a question and my response was a moment of the video, like not saying anything, called me un-American, called me a moron. And you know what? That's a badge of honor and I'll take it. But and I got to tell him about himself, but it was also just clearly a moment of real disrespect, misogyny, racialized misogyny.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're out of time, and I think as much as I don't necessarily want to end on racialized misogyny, I will say that I was and continue to be inspired by your story about, using your community and believing in yourself and pushing through, and not necessarily being one of those people who had it figured out at 20 and, going through different paths, because I think that we have such extraordinary leaders who are several places on their journey and haven't yet realized or haven't yet got up the gumption to say, I am going to go after it, or feeling like at some point it is too late. It is never too late as long as you're breathing. So if you have a vision of yourself leading something in some way, go for it. Whether or not you use the time well, it will pass. So I love this idea of just having that aha moment and saying, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. I'm going to try and fail or try and succeed, but I am going to try. So I'm super inspired by your story, and the fact that after, an attempted humiliation from which you brilliantly recovered, on an international stage, that you didn't just sort of slink into a corner and say, oh my gosh, you know, you said, no, I'm going to allow this to further empower me on my journey and keep on going. But also, I think the lesson that we learned here was that, you know, get yourself prepared and invest that time, not just in your education, but learning at a law firm and being willing to be seen and being willing to take the hits for those of us who come behind us. Because listen, it is never going to change unless we decide that we are going to make it change. So it's really up to us. Nobody is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves and save the others. So with that, I thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I thank you so much, Raya, for sharing your story. And you and I have to get together over a cup of coffee or wine. and just have a chance to get together about some of the challenges and opportunities in these unique spaces. Thank you so much for being with us again and listening. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. You can find us just about anywhere that you can access a podcast: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, what have you. And thanks again. Recommend to a friend. Thank you.